You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 327. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, author of How to Get On Podcasts, the podcast matchmaker, and CEO and founder of the MLG Collective. I'm excited to share the stories and life lessons of changemakers and authors with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and today we're getting fired up with Shannon Watts. She is the founder of Moms Demand Action, and her new book, Fired Up, comes out today. Shannon and I are talking all about how she launched Moms Demand Action, but also about her as a person, as a mom, a stepmom, a wife, her love for astrology, champagne, and so much more. I know you're going to enjoy getting to know Shannon. Hi, Shannon.
Hey, Michelle, how are you?
I'm so excited to talk to you. You have, well, I think you do have an idea, but
I love that. Thank you.
I feel it's so funny. I was reflecting this morning before we got on about how for years I have followed you and I've always reached out via DMs. You've always responded. And I think in my head, I'm like, we're friends. We've totally been connected.
We
for
are
years.
friends. I've talked about this before, but I was listening to a podcast once about friendship, and it said if you don't have 5 people you can call in the middle of the night with an emergency, you don't have enough close friends. And that cannot include your family, which is sort of why I had 5 kids in the first place. And so, I think that you and I just have to take that next step, which is, can we call each other in the middle of the night with an emergency?
You absolutely can. I give you permission to, yes, I will take your call. Absolutely.
Oh, great. Okay, good. That's good to know.
Can I do the same with you?
Yes, you can. Unless it has to do with like you're in jail.
Oh, okay. So there's parameters around it.
I mean, if you've gotten yourself into trouble.
But you know what? I think that these days, especially in California with what's going on right now.
That's a good point. Okay. If it's social justice related, you get a pass.
I think that's the only time, knock on wood, that you would find me in jail.
If you've pulled a Shannon Bador and you've driven your car into the neighbor's house,
then that's out. Yes.
That's out.
Or
Don't
you
call
flipped
me.
a table like Teresa, or you've done something. Yes. No, that if it's an embarrassing reason for it, absolutely, I am there.
If you're going to be on TMZ, please don't call.
Yeah, because that is one of my news sources. So, which is another thing, being arrested. I was also thinking about this morning. I obviously took a shower before we're on this call. But I was thinking back to when I was in my early 20s, starting in the corporate career days, and how you were told, don't dye your hair a certain color, don't have a bunch of tattoos, you don't want to be arrested. And this morning I'm seeing the assembly members of California are like, arrest me too, along with Newsom. And I went,
they've all got bleached hair and tattoos. And it's like a completely different generational.
It is. It's so funny how things have changed and we embrace this identity. And I felt like that also had to do with what we're going to talk about in your book of how you just find yourself and why does it take us so long?
It does. It does. I mean, if we're lucky enough to live, a long life, which none of us are guaranteed. And that's why I think it's so important that we start thinking about it.
Yes. So let's share with everyone. We haven't even done the introduction yet, but they'll know by the time they get to this who you are. But can you give everyone a brief intro as to who you are and what your new book, Fired Up, which comes out today. We're recording this a week early, but it comes out today. So happy Pub Day.
Thank you. No, it's so exciting. Having given birth many times, this feels like that. So back in 2012, after a decades-long career in corporate communications, I had taken a 5-year break. I was remarried and was blending a family of 5 kids and just thought, okay, I'll go back into the workforce. And I was getting ready to do that. It had been, as I said, 5 years. And I was folding laundry. It was a very cold day in suburban Indiana, right outside of Indianapolis. And suddenly there was a breaking news alert that there was an active shooter inside an elementary school in Connecticut. And I'm sure like you and so many people listening, I stopped what I was doing and just sat on the edge of my bed where I was folding laundry for hours and hours and sobbed as I watched this horrific tragedy unfold. That 20 children and 6 educators would be slaughtered in the sanctity of an American elementary school was unfathomable. It still is. And at some point after I went to bed in the middle of the night, that sadness turned into abject rage. I woke up just not knowing what to do with myself, knowing that I had to do something. And I went online and I looked for organizations like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, but for gun safety. And all I found were think tanks run by men, some one-off city and state organizations mostly run by men. And I knew that I wanted to be part of a badass army of women. But I really didn't think when I started this Facebook page that it was going to be anything more than an online conversation. I never imagined it would turn into this offline movement. In fact, the largest women-led nonprofit in the nation. But so many women and mothers had the same idea that I did that day, which was we have to get off the sidelines and stand up to the most powerful, wealthy special interest that's ever existed. And that was the beginning of an 11-year journey leading this organization. You know, we passed over 500 gun safety laws. We stopped the NRA 90% of the time when they were trying to pass bad laws. We elected thousands of our own volunteers and also everyday civilians as gun sets candidates. And we began to change the culture around this issue. You know, it's not going to get done in 11 years, but made some significant progress. And so when I stepped back in 2022, I announced I was stepping back. I took a year. I thought I'd have a break after that. And instead, I was running on the treadmill one night and I saw I had a call from Maria Shriver, who I didn't know very well. And she said, I want you to write a book for my imprint about what you've learned about women. And that was the beginning of a, almost 2-year now journey of writing this book and interviewing women and putting it out into the world.
I love it. And I love that you're just like, yeah, Maria Shriver just called me.
Trust me, I very much lost it. I was like, oh my God, I jumped off the treadmill and...
But these are the type of people you also know from what you do. I've seen who you've been with and who you've been photographed with. And I'm like, damn, Shannon's you're a big deal to me. Like, I appreciate everything that you have done in the world. And as a mom, like, it means so much to me because I want them to be safe. You know, I kick them out of the car on the curb Monday through Friday and tell them I love them and to own it and to slay it. And I want to make sure that these are the words that are coming out of my mouth versus, hey, you didn't do this today, or, you were naughty or whatever it is, because there is that fear. There's a constant fear. And I don't know.
Which is an absurd way to live, an absurd, it's my hope in 20 years we'll look back and, kind of like we do and say, like, how did people lay out in the sun, or how did people smoke cigarettes? Yeah. I think we will look back and say, how did we tolerate that?
And how do people tolerate it still? That's what baffles me. And you have to be so courageous and brave and have such tenacity, you yourself, to deal with people who still don't get it. It's the most frustrating thing to me. I think even in today's time, forget about gun laws, guns in general, but anyone who today thinks that anything that we see is okay is the most frustrating thing to me. How have you gone for over 11 years continuing this fight when you see this frustration right in front of you, when there are online trolls who are just... That's another part of, as I've started this life of activism and advocacy, that it comes up with my therapist all the time. I'm like, how do people like Shannon Watts, you've been brought up in therapy, deal with these online bastards who just are so mean and hateful? And she thinks that you have somebody who looks at your stuff so you don't have to. And I'm like, nope. I need to hire someone.
Nope.
Because it gets to you. It gets to me to a certain point. I'm getting better with it. But how have you dealt with this and kept your cool and continue to push through every single day?
Oh, well, look, I think there's a fine line between stupidity and naivete, and I had no idea what was coming my way. None whatsoever. All my public information was out there when I started Moms Demand Action. I hadn't been on Twitter. I had a handle, but I hadn't actually gone on. And within hours of creating this Facebook page, I started to get threats of death and sexual violence to me, to my kids. And it wasn't just online, right? It was people calling me and texting me and driving by my house. And in those early days, when I was living in Indiana, I called the local police department thinking, okay, I just want them to keep a closer eye on the neighborhood because there are a lot of suspicious people idling outside my house. And I was getting like those letters in the mail where they cut Son of
Oh,
Sam kind of
yeah.
thing. And when the officer came over, I explained what was going on, and he said, well, ma'am, that's what you get when you mess with the Second Amendment. And I think it was really in that moment I realized, okay, I am going to have to back down or I should double down. And that's a big choice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful that my family never expressed to me their fear or concern. And I'm not sure I think they were just like, my mom's a badass. They did not tell me that I should be scared or that they were scared. And because of that, I felt that I had the momentum to keep going, that I could double down. And I also think in that moment, I decided that those threats and those trolls would be like background noise to me. That if I lost my children, I had nothing left to lose. Why would I allow myself to be silenced and intimidated into inaction?
I love that. And I love that. Do you feel like you hid some of that from your kids though, so that they didn't
Mm.
know about it? Because I know, and even as I record this, I'm like, I have to be a little quiet because I know they're listening, but I know that I shield them from certain things that they don't know everything that's said online. My husband, he's another thing. Like he knows everything and he will be like, well, maybe you shouldn't have posted that. Is your husband
Yeah.
different? Like, I would think that he's protective of you in that sense.
I mean, you know, I think my husband thinks my Twitter personality is funny. It's somewhat disassociated from who I truly am. And he thinks, the things I say that are very bold and brash are sort of, the Twitter fodder. You have a sort of a personality online, I think. I say a lot of things that I'm always kind. Like you will never see me making fun of someone's appearance or calling people names, but I can be funny and somewhat cutting. And, that is sort of my Twitter personality. It isn't necessarily who I am in real life. But, my kids also, in those early days, trolls were getting their Facebook pages taken down. Facebook was a very big deal in 2013, 12. They were bullied by kids at school who didn't like what I was doing. It was, it's a very red state. And so there were certainly consequences, I think, for them. But and we can talk about, being on the other side of this now that my kids are adults at some point, but I just think that they feel like I set a good example for them, which is to not be scared, to not back down, and to ultimately, pursue your desires.
I love that. You're making me feel more confident in the decisions I'm making because they do grow up. And then, having a blended family, I know this. I've got a 26-year-old and a 23-year-old stepkids, and then I've got my younger ones. I mean, that's a hard road to balance too, that you're not only starting this nonprofit, you're becoming an
Yes.
activist, and then, oh, by the way, you're a stepmom too,
A
and dealing
brand
with
new
that.
stepmom. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, in a new marriage, blending the family, new roles. And for those 5 years that I'd taken that break, I was free to do what I wanted. My husband was working and I was not. And so I could drive the kids to soccer practice and I could cook dinner, even though I'm not a good cook. And I could, take care of the house and do all the errands. And suddenly in 2012, going into 2013, like I found myself busier than I'd ever been in my corporate career. And I was working for free for 11 years. And that definitely put a strain in those early days on my relationship, on the family dynamic. But what was interesting was my ex-husband and my husband had to step in and they had to like do all the things that I had been doing. And one of my favorite photos, I think it was probably like a few years later, one of my kids was getting a soccer award in high school. And, there's my ex-husband and my husband on either arm walking them across the field because I was traveling for Moms Demand Action. And, they didn't suffer for it. And in many ways, I think that the men in my life had to step up.
Which is good. We need to see more of that. And it brings me to the next point of mom's demand. everyone thinks, and I thought this too for a long time, that this is all gun sense. This is what it's about. And yet it is so much more, because the women who are involved in it, the mothers, it is about women's rights. It is about, everything that there is to be a mom, to speak up. There's so many more issues that are included in Moms Demand Action. And I love that. And I
Mm,
feel like even saying that this equal, like I think of Eve Rodsky whenever I think of,
yep.
men need to step it up, that they do need to step it up. And this is a way that you've set that entire example for years. And I don't think you get credit for it enough, that maybe people will realize now how much you've put into that. And, props to your ex-husband and your husband, that they did step up, and that they have, I don't want to say allowed you to do this, but enabled you
Yeah.
to do this for so long.
For sure. My husband, I give him a lot of credit. He has worked and supported all of us and allowed me to do this as a full-time volunteer. And we can talk about the passion tax, at some point if that's of interest to you. But you know, I what's interesting about Moms Demand Action is that I started it thinking that we were going to transform an issue. And what actually happened was that we were transformed too. Yes, we completely changed the politics around gun safety, but we were transformed as people, because when you come into an organization, and this is really the heart of my book, which is this formula for coming alive, for living on fire. And living on fire, the whole book is a fire metaphor, but living on fire is just this idea of figuring out two things, what's limiting you and what's calling you. And so Moms Demand Action became the world's largest field experiment, right? When you have 11 million supporters, to help you figure out what will make you personally come alive. And the formula is simply figuring out what are your abilities, what are your values, and what are your desires. And those are going to change throughout your life. My values are different when I was a young mom than they are now that I'm an empty nester. And so taking stock of those things and understanding truly what are my abilities. I notice that women often don't give themselves credit for their abilities. And so there are a lot of exercises in the book to help you figure that out. What are my values? And mine in 2012 were protecting my family and community. What are your desires? We don't talk a lot about what do I want when we're women. And there's a reason for that, right? Because the system is set up for us to fulfill our obligations while men fulfill their desires. And those obligations really become so overwhelming that we're either too busy, or we start to think those obligations are actually our desires, right? False fires. But really to live in a way that we ask ourselves, what do I want? And Moms Demand Action really was such a catalyst for myself and so many women to figure that out. And so I want women to constantly be thinking about those things. And it's really a practice, right? Like, how do you constantly practice bringing those three things into alignment? It's like alchemy. It feels like magic or touching the divine when it happens. And for me, it didn't happen until I was 41 years old. And I'm hopeful it will happen a lot more between now and the end of my life.
I love that. And I feel the same way. I felt like after I had kids, then things started changing and clicking. And I was in my late 30s. I'm now in my almost mid 40s, of it's starting to come more and more. And I hope, I said this in another interview, that what I'm learning now I can instill in my daughter, so she can have this in her 20s and not wait until she's in her 40s to figure this out. And I think that your
Yeah.
book does the same thing. Like, if we give this to all of our college grads or high school grads, these women are going to be like, oh, okay, I don't have to wait 20 years.
I'll be honest with you. When I was writing it, I had, I'm 54. I had a middle-aged woman in my mind. But what I have found, especially because I do so much teaching, like colleges will have me come and teach for a semester. And almost all the time, women stop me after class and they say, but I don't know what I want to do. I'm enrolled in this to graduate with this degree, and I don't know what I want to do. And I interviewed over 70 women for this book. And what was really interesting to me is how many of them were put on a path by their parents or their family of what they believe they should do, particularly immigrants, right? There's this idea that the American dream is you're an engineer, you're a doctor, or you're a lawyer, full stop. You get to pick one of those three things. And I interview a lot of women who either are immigrants or they were born to immigrants in this country. And they found themselves spending years going down this path. and finally realizing, at some point, like, this is not for me. This is not who I am. This is not what I want. And so when you look at the archetypes of the women who might read this book, I think it is the high school or college grad. It is the mom with young kids. It is the new empty nester. It is the retiree, right? Because the beauty of, I don't know if you're a millennial or a Gen Xer. I'm a Gen
81.
Xer.
I'm
You might
like
be a
on the cusp
very
of both.
young Gen Xer. We have such different lives than our moms had. At least I do. My mom didn't go to college, wasn't expected to go to college. My mom, once she turned, 45 or so, was sort of expected to disappear and wasn't considered, vibrant or, bringing anything to society. I mean, that was sort of the way we looked at women for a long time. And I feel like I'm just getting started. I've raised my family. I'm an empty nester. I have tons of wisdom and energy, and I don't want to waste it. I want to do it. I want to spend it doing things that I love.
I love that. I want to talk about also you're on many boards, which is incredible and why I follow so many of them. But one of them is Emerge, and you encourage more women to run for office. I want to talk about women running for office, and also why aren't you running for office? And I'll tell you why I'm not.
Okay. I believe there's a moral imperative in this country for women to run. I really do. I think that this is why I'm excited. My book is coming out. It seems like we're at a very politically chaotic time, and yet that's the best time for women to figure out what are my values, abilities, and desires, and how can I bring them to the world. And that doesn't have to be political. It can be personal or professional. We just need women who are feeling alive right now in this moment. And women only hold about 25% of the 500,000 elected positions in this country. As the saying goes, when you don't have a seat at the table, you are probably on the menu. And women's rights and freedoms and safety are certainly on the menu. So I have seen firsthand through Moms Demand Action, the best way to make sure that our voices and our votes count is to be represented. And I don't care if that's county coroner or local sheriff or city council or school board. It doesn't have to be Congress or president, right? I just really think that if you have the ability, that you should think about how you can serve your community and run. And I don't mean that as a career. I mean as a community public service. Your question about what about me running? I get asked that a lot. I never say never. I just moved to Florida. This is the 10th state I've lived in. Many of those red states. I love a political challenge. So, I need to get acclimated in the state and kind of get the lay of the land, but I certainly am not ruling it out.
My only concern has always been that then I can't vocalize the way that I want to, what I do online. I learned this in our mayoral campaign, that I could go on Twitter and say whatever I wanted, and the mayor and his wife could not. And they were like, thank you for saying that, because we can't. And I thought, well, that's a great freedom that I enjoy and would like to continue. Although I do feel like we're seeing a lot of unhinged, whatever you want to say, politicians.
Post Donald Trump, I think all bets are off.
So maybe
honestly.
I can still say what I want and run. But, I think in California, we also, we've got two great senators. I love my congressman. I know the other representatives too. And I'm like, maybe when they decide to move on, but there's no reason to really run against them per se, including our council.
California is a different animal too.
It is, because we're blue. We need to stay blue. I fear that we could turn purple and then red. But now, I think that I'm surrounded by those people that they're supposed to be there, and they're doing a great job. And I will tell them they're doing great, and I will tell them that they're not doing so great when I disagree. But that's why I feel there's no need for right now. School board, maybe, because we've got a Moms for Liberty person in there right now, and she needs to go. But yeah, that's why. I want to also talk about something kind of fun, because I am into this, and I know that you're doing monthly astrology readings, and I get my daily astrology, and I'm like, oh, I want to talk about this. What is your interest? What is your sign too?
So I have always been interested in astrology and the Enneagram and all these ways. I actually did a Substack Live recently with a woman named Susan Piver. And she has written about the Enneagram. She's a Buddhist. She's fascinating. But she basically said there are three realms. She explains what they are. But one of those realms is communication through symbols and through signs. and that it's a very valuable way to get information about the universe and other people. That's kind of how I see it. I am a Capricorn sun. I am a Pisces moon, and I'm a Cancer rising, which is, I had an astrologer once say, like, I have the perfect chart to have started Moms Demand Action because I have a lot of mother, father energy. And I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, which, take that for what you will. Donald Trump is also an 8 on the Enneagram. You can use that power for good or evil, I guess. What about you?
I'm a Cancer.
You're interested in it too?
I have always, ever since I was a child, like I would read my daily
Me
horoscope
too.
in the newspaper. And these days I get the My Astrology email every day and I'm reading through it. Okay, today somebody's going to say something to me apparently, but I need to not take it to heart, that kind of a thing. I just enjoy it. I don't live by it of, my day will be like this. But I enjoy it. I think it's fun. I recently had a tarot card reading by a friend, and I'm like, this is fantastic. It said that there was going to be emotion and tears. And then 10 minutes later, I was just a sobbing mess. And I was like, this is great. Look at the cards. I think it's fascinating. It's fun. It's, I've had, so I set the kids up with email addresses when they were born. And I've written them emails, and I once had a human design.
Oh my gosh, like Meghan Markle.
But
I
did it before Meghan.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I own their web domains and I own their email addresses. I was like, I got to snap this up. You never know. Like they could be, they're like,
did you TM? Did you
no,
trademark?
Although my daughter has asked, like, are we like Blue Ivy? Are you going to copyright and trademark our names? No, you're not that. No. But I wanted to they've got rapid reward numbers with Southwest. They're set up. And so I had a human design person read their charts and they were going through their inbox the other day. And my daughter goes, what is this? What is this chart, human design? I'm like, oh, this says that you were brought together. Your souls were up there and you came down together because they're a year apart. And so I've even had their charts done just for fun.
That is, you're like the best mom in the world. You're really an organized mom.
In some cases, I don't know what's for dinner, but I know they're human design charts.
I'm very impressed.
I love that. I feel like it's to get to know you and these different kind of, these are personal things that I think not everybody recognizes or realizes that this is part of you. And I think that's the fun part, to get to know you as Shannon Watts, not as Moms Demand Action, Shannon Watts, founder, speaker, all of these things. And so you have a book tour coming up, and then what's next after that? Do you know yet? Or it's a big question. No. I know.
It is a big question because I never took that break that I thought I was going to take after stepping back, because I went right into not only writing the book, but I was a surrogate on the Kamala Harris campaign. So the last year has just been a whirlwind. I don't know. It'll be really interesting once this book tour, it's going to take up a lot of my summer. But, what happens in the fall? I don't know. It's kind of, I will tell you that when I stepped back from moms, I felt a lot of anxiety about how do I disentangle my identity from what I've been doing for 11 years? Like when people ask me, who are you or what do you do? How do I answer that? And I don't feel any trepidation post-book about that. And maybe it's because I've been working so hard for so long. But my husband has this saying, and it's sort of a sports-ified Buddhist proverb, but it's this idea of letting the game come to you, or in other words, making space and understanding that you can't have creativity without calming down and just kind of taking a beat. I think it's really time for me to do that.
I love that. I'm in the middle of reading Big Magic. I definitely feel like when you create the white space, I was telling my 10-year-old this the other day, he's like, Mom, when I don't watch video games or do something, I feel like ideas come to me. I'm like, yes, that's called white space. Yes, we need more of that.
Yes.
I definitely agree. I think you deserve some beach time. Now you've got a dock and there's water involved. So that's perfect.
And manatees, maybe I'll become a manatee expert.
Do that. Yeah, I'll come visit you and you can teach me all about it. Even though I swore off Florida, I'll come for you.
I understand.
And we didn't even get to talk about your Buddhism. I'm so fascinated, and I've shared that with you before. And I love your nightly ritual of a glass of champagne. I feel everyone should understand this.
Yes.
What is behind that? How did
Every
that come about?
night, rain or shine. I love champagne so much. I guess that's the bougie person in me. But, I'd rather have champagne than a glass of wine or a cocktail or anything. I'd love champagne. And now that I've gone through menopause, like a glass of red wine is kryptonite because it will just keep you awake all night. So now what I do every night with dinner is I have a glass of champagne, and we just decided to make it a nightly ritual. Like, you only live a certain amount of time. If you love champagne, why not have a glass?
I love
every
it.
night?
But do you have a big bottle or do you have the individual bottles?
Just one glass.
No,
So
but
there's a champagne cork that you put back on that keeps the bubbles fresh.
I actually wondered this the other night as I opened the fridge. I thought of you. It's weird how you're in my thoughts. Okay. I know it's weird. It's stalkerish, but I was like, I wonder how big of a bottle Shannon has. Like, does she do the cork or does she open a small one every night? And
nope, we just do the cork and do one glass, like small glass. I told my physician and she was fine with it.
I love that you give that disclaimer. Favorite brand?
Yes. Oh, as long as it's not sweet, I'll drink any champagne. I just please do not give me a glass of Prosecco, please.
I love it. I'm a Vouv fan. There's my bougie.
Yeah,
There's my bougie. Yeah. We watch old movies, and every time they have the Vouv, I'm like, yes. It tastes better.
I want to go to the Champagne region of France. That's the dream.
Well, okay. So give yourself that time. Do that.
Maybe I'll go do
that. Yes. I want photos if I'm not there.
Yes.
You are amazing. Thank you so much for coming on, for writing this book, for all of the work that you've done over a decade. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you so much. Thank you for having this conversation with me, and just grateful for all you do.
Thank you. And I can't wait to see you in a couple of weeks.
Yes. I'll see you at the GG's.
Okay, friends, it's time to raise your glass of champagne for the evening. Get out your book, Fired Up. And if you're in San Jose, come and join Shannon and I at the GG's. She is going to be here in person signing books. It's a 2-hour event. And you can find the link on my bio in Instagram, all over the place, or at Shannon's Instagram. But come and say hi. It will be fun for sure. And I hope that you have gotten some inspiration as to what your desires are, what it is that you want to do, what fires you up. And don't forget to find those 5 friends and start building your community, because we all need to rely on one another.